Hey, welcome to another episode of Coffee and HEMA with me, Jamie McKeever. I haven't done one of these in a while. Well, I haven't posted one of these in a while. I filmed a bunch, and you'll probably see a bunch coming up soonish that will all say, "Oh, I haven't done one of these in a while," in rapid succession because I've not got around to video processing. Reason for that, if you follow me on everything, or even if you just watch every video I publish here, I've mostly been focused on safety research. We did the Safety Tips project last year. On the back of the Safety Tips project, I've had lots of work to follow up on in terms of finalising deliverables for it. If you don't know what Safety Tips is, we did some experiments to understand different risks associated with thrusts, both in terms of pushing on a mask and potentially puncturing a target, and various other safety research that has taken a lot of time. This video, I wanted to talk about what I'm doing on the back of my own research, what I'm doing differently, which isn't quite the same thing as what I have recommended on the back of the research. And the reason for that is that there's only so much that the experimental research and that we've done can say for sure. But there are things that I think, based upon the research, are a good idea, and I'm doing them. And I will do further research, hopefully, to test, funding allowing. And if you'd like to see further research to back up what I'm about to tell you, I have a Patreon for all my safety research linked in the comments. So please consider supporting me there. And if you support me on the Patreon, and I'm able to meet my goal of reducing one of my days of work, regular work, a week to just focus on safety research, you'll get more Coffee and HEMA videos because the time I'm currently using to do safety research will go back to being free time and to do things like this that is more fun for me and less of a job. Anyway, what am I doing? So what has the research done so far? So Safety Tips is the first project, the main project that we've done. And yeah, as I say, that looked at puncture risk, so the risk of a sword puncturing a target and the risk of pushing on a mask. We found, broadly speaking, that rubber tips are more likely to push on a mask. Bullet cases, which is one of the things we tested, are still pretty likely to puncture and still deflect off a mask better than rubber. But that plastic tips, like this one, neither push on a mask nor have a high risk of puncture. In fact, drastically reduce the risk of puncture to practically nothing from the targets that we used. I've since also done a project called 10 published a report called 10 10 case studies in puncture injury, where I looked at 10 examples of people who have actually been stabbed by a sword, either their equipment failed or they got injured. And the test that we did in Safety Tips, we also tested untipped longswords, found a lot of those, couldn't find any differences between them really to speak of, but found a lot of those did puncture our target in the experimental conditions. And the 10 case studies absolutely confirm that perfectly ordinary tips, such as this rolled tip Regenier that you would happily see untipped in this state, pretty much any tournament you go into, absolutely, in the right circumstances or the wrong circumstances, depending how you think about it, will puncture flesh and potentially equipment. I don't have any cases of something this big puncturing equipment, but I do have other kind of flared and smaller flared tips puncturing equipment. Including an Ensiver, which is basically the same size. So yes, up to similar sizes. I tell a lie. We do have cases of actually this exact tip puncturing not 350 Newton equipment, but under gloves and other soft equipment. So absolutely, in terms of non-Newton rated fabric, absolutely can be punctured by an untipped sword. Additionally, if you know, run the Wessex League, and we've been looking at various things within that. Last year we collected pretty comprehensive statistics on injury data and sword data, and we found that stiffer swords are more likely to cause thrusting injuries. It's a short version that should be published soon, it's not published out yet. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and broadly speaking, my only real recommendation to the community so far has been don't tip with rubber. On the back of the case studies, I think 9 out of 10 of the case studies would have been solved by a larger tip. So in that one, I did say you should probably think about tipping your swords. But the community will be not necessarily all doing everything all at once, and as a result, I've had to think about what I'm doing from my own safety perspective. So if you'd already heard all of that, because you already read everything I've done, but now we're caught up. So what am I doing? What am I personally doing? First of all, I'm not using any untipped swords. Even if they're a big tip like this, even a ciggy, even anything else, they are all being replaced with thermoplastic tips. Okay, PCL thermoplastic. This one is a brand called Colormorph by Thermoworks, or White Morph. You can get it more easily if you don't want it colored, but the color looks much better. And these are both Regenier standard tips. Even just pushing my hand against this, right? I know, yeah, you can see a nice little mark there from that. The comfort difference, even from something, just a little test like that, you know, is staggering. And this is the second mark, so you can't really see it. I can't stress enough. We couldn't puncture our target in the experimental conditions with a tip like this at more than, if I get it right, 6 times the force that this would be puncturing a target. This exact sword, in fact. Well, this sword actually was before it was tipped, but it's the same tip. That's huge, right? That is a vast difference. And actually, we tried a weaker target and we still couldn't puncture it. So, while puncture risk is relatively low in terms of it doesn't happen very often, it's pretty severe. Doing this pretty much reduces it to 0, from what I can tell. That's huge. I don't want to injure my friends. Puncture injuries, bad, scary, don't like them. The one that wouldn't have been affected by tip was a broken sword, okay, and that's rare. It's a broken sword and the thrust continued. That's rare enough that, you know, reducing the other 9 injuries is pretty important. But I can't guarantee what other people are doing, right? That's what I'm doing. That helps. That saves my friends. That doesn't save me, right? I've not yet required them at things like Wessex League or my club. I'm leaning towards that. I've got some experiments planned in future that might lead me towards making that recommendation. But what do I do if I'm going to some random event, you know, in another country or anything like that? So I am also upgrading all my kit to 800 Newton. For the most part, I was already using 800 Newton. So it's not a huge change for me in some of this regard, because I already had an 800 Newton jacket. I already had 800 Newton trousers, right? And obviously a level 2 mask for 1600 Newtons per mask. Partly for similar reasons already. You know, I was already not sure whether 350 Newton was good enough, and I always compete in different environments, and I was like, well, I want to be confident that I'm not going to get stabbed, right? That's pretty important to me. On my Thought gloves also, the upgraded version, the 800 Newton version. I was using, though, these for rapier. These are something like this, not necessarily this exact one. This is from Red Dragon, I think. I've had it for years. Something like this is probably the most common rapier glove you'll see. I'm sure many of you will have seen something like this, right? It featured quite heavily in the, these and similar gloves featured quite heavily in the puncture studies, case studies. I think 3 of them had something that looked exactly like that. Straw gone straight through it. Worst one, it went through the palm, up the sleeve, into the armpit. Horrible injury, guy's fine, thank God. So, the day after I published that, or rather, no, I hadn't published it yet, but I compiled it. I was in a rapier tournament, looking at my hand in this and thinking, I'm not sure I want to be using this anymore. So I've not used these yet, but I have bought sport fencing gloves. I'm going to look stupid, right? I'm going to have very big white gloves over my black jacket, and everything else is black and red, and I'm going to have these white, bright gloves. I didn't get coach fencing gloves because I don't think they actually follow the same standard as the competition gloves. They're certainly not required to, and they don't say that they do. Why these? Why sport fencing gloves? Well, sport fencing gloves have 800 Newton material required, back of hand. This looks like the back of the fingers. It also that, which is good. And not the front of the fingers, they don't require it to be, and this looks like it's a grippy material with some overlap here. This area is all puncture resistant, which is where most of the injuries we see were. I saw injuries here, I saw injuries here, or at least punctures here in the case studies, and they're all protected. Sport fencing gloves also have a seam test, which is another point of failure that we saw in that. I like my hands. I like my hands to stay intact. I don't want to be stabbed through, and so I've gone for these. They are less padded than the leather gloves are, at least on the back, but I do use a sail dagger, I do use a cut hilt rapier, so I'm not too concerned about that personally, although of course broken fingers are just a different risk to worry about. And the reason I'm doing all this stuff is, as I say, I don't know what somebody else is going to bring to the table, right? The worst injuries we see in the case studies, and this was reflected in the Wessex data that we see as well, and reflected in other situations, the worst injuries happen where there are multiple points of failure, right? the equipment has failed, and there's a behavior component, and there's something else, potentially, all kind of combined, and that leads to the worst kind of case. If only one thing fails, we tend to see minor injuries or bruising or uncomfortableness, but if multiple things fail, we tend to see some pretty severe injuries, some of which are horrific. And if you want to horrify yourself, please go read the case studies, particularly the last one that has a 40 centimeter extrusion of a sword outside the other side of the hand, which is something I am keen to personally avoid. If you are using, so what would I recommend to you? If you're using any kind of glove, look at it, right? Particularly things like sparring gloves, when using underglove, considering what underglove you should use. Don't just use something light, right? Get something puncture resistant, at least puncture resistant work gloves that are puncture resistant in the palm. Sport fencing gloves may make suitable undergloves as well. Overlap to the jacket sleeve is quite important. And consider whether you want to upgrade any of the other kit. The only puncture resistant HEMA glove I'm aware of is the Thuck gloves. They've followed the sport fencing standard, so in theory should be puncture resistant in all those locations. And there may be other undergloves you can use. And the EN388 is the other standard that has puncture resistance in it. You can see that from whatever one you do, although it doesn't have a seam test, so it's not necessarily as good as a sport fencing glove for puncture resistance. But might be for other things. I also recommend tipping your swords. PCL thermoplastic. Look for things like white morph, thermoplastic, thermoset, polymorph. It's kind of the name's colormorph for this one. Not all brands are good. I've discovered. So if you do find a bad brand, please tell me about it so I can help spread the word. This is a brand called ThermoWorks. It comes under white morph or colormorph. They are very good. There may be other good ones. I don't know. I don't know how available it is outside of the UK because I'm in the UK and that's where I've done it. I strongly recommend tipping swords. I will be looking for other methods because there are some practical issues with thermoplastic tips like this. This one took me 4 minutes to make. I made it half an hour ago. I basically made it, had a shower and come made this video. It's now perfectly ready for use. This stays on. It's not coming off even without tape. I will tape it up just to protect the base because that's where some cracks can happen. But fundamentally, that is now perfectly ready to go. The downside of it is the melting point is low enough that if you leave your swords in a hot car, it will melt, and it's a problem. And it does need at least half an hour from making it to using it before it's ready to go. So making it just before a tournament, not ideal. So I'll be looking at other things to tip with, but this should be a nice quick fix. 500 grams of the stuff cost me £20. This is 10 grams, so 44p of material to potentially save my friends from being stabbed. Seems like a good effort, good value for me. So that's what I'm doing. I've upgraded everything to 800 Newton because I don't trust people and I don't know what they're going to do. I'm tipping all of my swords, literally everything. Don't care how big the tip is. The native tip is on it. The native point on it is it's getting a plastic tip. Most of my swords have had a plastic tips for months. This one's fresh because this is one that lives at the club. I took it home to tip it, and even my long sword that's had a tip on it for 4 months. Done 2 tournaments with it, and effectuator, and some other, and heavy spar and other things. Tips going strong, right? Very cheap, very durable. Well, reasonably durable. Will last a while and easy to replace. Or just heat up and fix if it breaks. So, long whistle stop tour. That's my recommendations. That's what I'm doing. If you want more detail on any of this, it's available on my website, historicalfencingresearch.com. If you want to support more of this kind of research, follow my join my Patreon, which is linked in the comment, which is patreon.com/historicalfencingresearch. I'm very imaginative with my naming. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll get some more videos up soon on more fun topics.